Hello all, bit of a random one this time. I was watching a couple of YouTubers and they were talking about Doctor Who, saying that Love and Monsters is one of the episodes they don't like. Now I know this episode's quite polarising, but I've always quite liked it, and it prompted me to do a little video on it, just to explain what I like about it. Love and Monsters is Season 2 Episode 10 of Doctor Who. It was originally aired in 2006, and there will be spoilers, but in fairness, something that's nearly 17 years old, I think that's okay. It's one of those episodes that barely features the Doctor, like Blink, although unlike Blink, which is universally loved, this isn't. It focuses around Elton Pope, a young chap who had a run-in with the Doctor when he was a kid, and we see the world of the Doctor through his eyes. And it very much reminds me of the Marvel comic called The Marvels, which is a masterful piece if you've never read it, which tells the story of a photographer basically recounting the history of the Marvel Universe as an observer of all these great events. And this is not quite the same, but it's definitely got echoes of that. It starts with Elton running towards the TARDIS. He hears Rose and the Doctor shouting, goes to find out what it is, discovers a monster, and there follows a Scooby-Doo-esque door scene with Rose, the monster, and the Doctor running backwards and forwards. And then the Doctor suddenly stops, stares directly at him, and says, "I know you." And this is the brilliance of Tennant. He took it from this wacky, ridiculous scene to this dead serious, straight on, quite ominous statement. And at which point we find out that Elton, as a child, met the Doctor. He can't remember much about it, he just remembers coming downstairs and seeing the Doctor. After that, he got on with his life. And then, obviously, the events of the first series and the second series, with the spaceship crashing into Big Ben, the Christmas invasion, and a couple of other things, suddenly reignites his interest. And he basically connects with Ursula, who has a website where she's discussing the Doctor. And it turns out there's an inner circle of people who meet up to discuss the Doctor, to discuss what they know about him. So Elton goes along, and this inner circle is really a bunch of misfits. All likeable people, all distinct people who, for various different reasons, have this interest. And then they start becoming friends and a community. And it very much echoes fandom, I think. You know, those shared interests which bring people together. I quite like that. I don't know if it's intentional, but I quite like that element of it. And it stops being about the Doctor and becomes more about a group of friends getting together. Until Victor Kennedy appears, and Victor Kennedy's got his own agenda. He brings them back to finding the Doctor, and one by one this group start disappearing. They don't have much luck finding the Doctor, so Victor points them towards Rose and gets them to find Rose. And there's quite a comedic bit where Elton's talking about how difficult it's going to be to find Rose, and then literally the first person he asks sort of said, "Oh yeah, that's Rose, that's Jackie's daughter, Jackie just lives down there." And then literally over the road you have someone say, "Hello Jackie," and Jackie shouts back. Again, quite a comedic scene where he's trying to get to know Jackie, but he doesn't really have to bother because Jackie's being a bit of a cougar. Invites him back to her place because she's got a problem with the washing machine, and then she keeps having problems and invites him back. But it gives you more of an insight into Jackie beyond that. And although it's explicitly stated, it gives you a window into the idea of the person who's left behind, the person who's waiting, the tragedy of that situation, and another glimpse into a character of the defiant loyalty, because she discovers a picture of Rose in his pocket and realises that he's looking for the Doctor. Unfortunately, Elton, right before this, had thought, "Why am I doing this? She's a nice woman. I don't care about this anymore. I love Ursula. This is ridiculous." And he goes back, tells Victor, "Screw this, we're leaving." At this point, there's only 3 of them left from the original 5. They leave. Victor asks Mr. Skinner, who's one of them, back, because Mr. Skinner started to have a connection with another member of the group, Bridget, who's already disappeared in inverted commas. And so Victor says, "I've got some numbers, we can find her." Elton and Ursula leave. Ursula's forgotten her phone. They go back, discover that Victor is actually an alien called the Absorbaloff. And it looks ridiculous. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, because I believe it was designed by a competition winner. But Peter Kay is also playing quite satirically and quite campy and hamming it up, which kind of takes the threat away from the character. It turns out that Victor has basically absorbed the other members of the group into himself, and you see their faces talking on the outside. A little bit more tragedy here because, as I say, Mr. Skinner and Bridget were forming a connection, but Mr. Skinner's absorbed on the front and Bridget's absorbed on the back, so even in their horrible situation they can't really be together. And he basically absorbs Ursula, chases after Elton, and right when Elton's about to be killed, the TARDIS turns up. The Doctor comes out, says someone wants to speak to you. Rose comes out and starts having a go at Elton for upsetting her mum. There's then kind of a plot convenience where the monster gets defeated. The Doctor explains to Elton that he was there to try and stop a creature that lived in the shadows, but he couldn't stop it killing his mother. And that's what Elton had blocked out, was that night was the night his mother died. The Doctor manages to retrieve an element of Ursula as basically a face in a paving slab. And Elton and Ursula are together now. There's a lot of silliness in the episode. There's a lot of cartoony comedy. But as always with Doctor Who, certainly with this run, even the silly bits have some really nice character development. And those are the parts that always bring you back. The group, who call themselves Linda, which is an acronym, they're really nicely defined people. Bridget, for example, she's coming down to London every week. They presume to join in this group, but it turns out she's coming down to London to find her daughter, who hasn't been disappeared by aliens. She's got involved in drugs and disappeared in London. And that's a level of tragedy there. And then you have the tragedy of all these people who become friends in this group being used and ultimately suffering a really horrific fate. To be absorbed into someone's body, to lose everything they are and just be trapped. The idea that to even touch the Doctor can somehow destroy your life. As I was watching it, because I just watched it again, it reminded me of a comment in the film Prophecy, great film if you've never watched it, where I believe it's Christopher Walken says, "Would you ever want to meet an angel?" And this echoes through this, because the Doctor is this amazing, glorious being who saves lives, who saves planets. But as he's doing so, he destroys lives. And it's something that's actually reflected on in the last episode of Season 4, Journey's End. The devastation the Doctor leaves behind him. All the lives lost and ruined. So that was quite a nice bit of secular writing. I don't know if it's intentional, but it was just, I quite like that. I quite like that idea. And maybe that's something I only appreciate after watching the full run rather than watching this the first time. And there's the tragedy, as I say, of Elton, who is a bit of a lost soul. He's a bit of a no-hoper who's just trudging through life, and he's had these moments of magic. And he meets this woman who he realises is so important to him, finally asks her to go for a meal with him right before she effectively dies. And yeah, sure, she's a face in a paving slab, but, to be honest with you, I didn't like that ending. It was a bit too silly, really. So yeah, there's just so many depths and levels to this story that I think can get so easily overlooked because of the comical nature of the villain, despite what he does. The plot contrivance that enables them to beat him at the end, some of the more comical Scooby-Doo elements of it. There's plenty to criticise, but I just think it's quite clever, quite inventive, and another insight into the Doctor that you don't see, and an insight into Jackie, because Jackie was occasionally a tragic character, but this really emphasises the true tragedy of her, that she's alone and she's lonely, that tragedy of the person left behind and what they have to cope with, the not knowing, the never knowing. So to me, it's really quite a dark underlying story. It's a story of friendship, it's a story of community, it's a story of awkward, disparate people finding a connection with each other and finding love almost. And the tragedy of life of that being torn away quite brutally and quite unpleasantly. And whilst I wouldn't say it's one of my favourite episodes, I still think this is a very, very underrated episode that probably deserves more love than it gets. This might all be headcanon. This might be all stuff that I'm imagining while I'm watching it and I'm fitting pieces in that aren't really there. But isn't that the greatest thing about sci-fi, about genres, is that it can become greater than maybe it originally is? You can read different meaning into different parts of it. There's a philosophy behind it that you can reach into. It can be enjoyed on multiple levels. You can enjoy it for the fun, for the questions it poses, for the character development or the emotion levels. These are things that make good stories to me. Anyway, I'll leave that there. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe. And I'd be interesting to know what you think of this episode. If you hated it, if you loved it, if you think I'm talking a load of bollocks, I'm more than happy to hear your opinions, whatever they may be. As usual, the plug for my comic, which is available from my website, and the link is in the description below. Once again, thank you for listening, and peace out.